Siva, can you check your screen share first, then I'll open it. Yeah, because
Shiva,
you'll
we have
be...
met before, huh? I'm just...
Uh,
Were you at IIT Bombay?
yes, yes. Yeah, we have met twice actually.
Yeah.
So,
We have met before. Right.
yeah,
Different
yeah.
context.
Yes, yeah. So once I think we met I mean, you came for a seminar in our department.
Right.
Yeah, and one was an institute seminar. Yeah.
Yeah. Got it.
Apart from Shiva, is there anyone else who has a presentation to share? If so, we should check it out straight away. Are you planning to make any presentations, Zulfikar or Dr. Chitur?
I don't. I mean, given the time, I'm just hoping to just speak. There is a presentation which I have shared with Shiva and all. It could be possibly shared, but
what about you,
I can
Dr.
go through the presentation per se.
That's fine. What about you, Dr. Chitur? Is there something you plan to present?
Not really, sir.
Okay.
I think I'll be just deliberating on the talk.
Fine. So the suggested structure is that Professor Fansalkar will start with a 5-minute introduction, and then I'll take about 10 minutes to introduce the theme as well as briefly introduce each of the participants. And then for about 20 minutes or so, Siva will make a presentation about the sharing the essence and summary of the report and the findings. And after this, we have each one of the panelists responding to it or adding to it for about 10 minutes each. And the sequence that's been suggested is first Zulfikar, and then Chitor, and then Elton. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that should be.
After which I'll speak for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we have a discussion with anyone from the audience. The only help I need is that I don't know if we have anyone participating from any of the field areas where this work was taken up. If so, please do help us to identify those participants in case they have something to add or supplement, or if they need to give some clarification. That will be useful to have.
Sure. Yes, so Vaishnavi is there with us, so she will be helping us. So she was also part of the study. So
okay, fine.
Yeah, she will help us through that. So I just
Balu, just a clarification. After Siva presents,
yes,
is it expected that we all will make some remarks on the study, or no? How is it?
Well, the suggested structure is that after Shiva makes the presentation, each one of the 3 panelists, and followed by that me as moderator, has about 10 minutes time, which you can use to speak on this theme. Partly it could be reflections, questions, clarifications related to the presentation, and partly it could be any thoughts or wisdom that you want to bring to the discussion on the theme. It could take off from the presentation or add to the presentation and so on. That's the idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where are you based, Mr. Elton?
Right now, I work in the Netherlands, so that's where I'm calling from now.
Okay, fine.
So it is 12:30. That the time that the webinar starts.
Okay, which part of the Netherlands are you in?
Yeah, somewhere close to between Amsterdam and The Hague.
Okay.
Yeah, in a city called Leiden.
Oh, okay. We have all heard of the Leiden jar as part of our high school physics. I think that's Leiden has a university, if I remember right, which is quite a nice place.
Nice, it is quite nice, quiet and
an institute of Indology and all that. Okay, I remember.
Yes, yeah.
Is there anything else you want to tell us, Shiva? Anything we know that you think we should know before we launch? There are about 3 to 4 minutes to go now.
I think we are good. Sanjay sir, so you don't want to add anything?
Okay, fine. How many people do you expect to be participants in this for this discussion? Any idea?
About 150.
What's that again? Come again?
150. 100 to 150 is what. Yeah.
Okay. Fine. All right. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
So, Shivam, Palak, should I share the screen?
I think in the beginning we'll have that, this.
Okay.
So we will start with the introduction part, and then when you start with the presentation, at that time you can begin.
Yeah.
Shiva, shall we start or?
Yeah, I think we can.
Yeah? Balu, what do you say? Shall we wait or go ahead?
Go ahead. I think we can go ahead. Fine.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on the reasons, exploring reasons why the sustainable agricultural practices do not spread. My name is Sanjeev Fansalkar, and I work as director of an entity called VikasAnvesh Foundation. We are working on the research issues involved in social and in particular rural development domain. And this subject has been fascinating me for quite some time. About a decade back, when I used to be the program director in the Dorab Tata Trust in Mumbai, now renamed as Tata Trust, I used to support a program for system of root intensification or SRI on a very large scale. And we had reached to 115 districts across the length and breadth of this country, starting from below the sea level in Bengal to 2,200 meters above sea level in Mussoorie and that area of Uttarakhand. And we found that this uniformly worked. The system of root intensification, or SRI as it was called, uniformly worked wherever, producing excellent increments on the yield, reducing cost of seeds and cost of other inputs and so on. And yet the system just would not spread on its own. Now we know in this today's world that COVID is spreading so rapidly. So it tends to confirm my hypothesis that nothing other than infections and bad habits spread on their own. While I understand that it would take efforts to spread good practice like sustainable agriculture practice, the issue remains, why doesn't it get taken up, even though it has good implications for cost, good implications for soil, good implications for the environment around you, and of course, good implications for the produce. We used this term rather inclusively because what can be called sustainable agriculture practices tends to range from purely, you might say even obstinately purely organic cultivation practices to what is more fashionably called these days responsible cropping practices. And there are shades of differences in each one of them. But the common problem across all of them is that they don't spread. So last year, Shiva, who is an excellent scholar in the field of agriculture, having done his PhD in IIT Mumbai, and he is my colleague at VikasAnvesh Foundation. I suggested to him that why don't you take up this topic? And I think he has done a wonderful, competent job, as you could very well see from this report. So we thought we will try and discuss this across a range of participants who are interested in this topic, because it is of such critical importance. And we could not have found a better anchor person or a moderator person for this than Sri Balu, because he has spent a lifetime in trying to propagate sustainable agriculture practices, trying to train people about it, and he runs this beautiful organization called Center for Indian Knowledge Systems in Chennai, based out of Chennai. And I've had the fortune of interacting with him in the past when both of us used to sit on the board of something called FRLHT, Foundation for Revitalization of Local Traditions in Bangalore. So I think I'll stop here and I'll request Balu to introduce the remaining other panelists and take on with this. And this is where I shut up and remain quiet. Over to you, Balu.
So thank you very much, Professor Fansalkar. It's indeed a great pleasure and privilege to be part of this panel and to facilitate this discussion. When I first saw the title of this report that was circulated by Shiva, saying, why does it not scale up? I was reminded of this, that over 20 years back when we were given support by a donor, Ford Foundation to be precise, one of the officials posed this question to me. He said, Balu, if this sustainable agriculture or these aspects have all these positive elements, it should be spreading like wildfire, but why is it not spreading? This was an interesting question to try and answer, and we are not the first people trying to answer it. So it has been answered at varied levels. In fact, very much along the line that Sanjeev said. It's been answered very interestingly at a philosophical level by a person who is perhaps not just India's greatest theoretician of over a century, but strangely enough also greatest practitioner of over a century. I had occasion to reread parts of Mahatma Gandhi's Hind Swaraj at the time of this pandemic. And I found in it a very interesting discussion where the Mahatma goes on to take on the railways, the holy of all the British institutions. And then he had kind of an imaginary opponent with which he had a discussion. And this person says, you're given a one-sided account. Good men can visit these places as well as bad men. Why do they not take the fullest advantage of railways? And I'll quote what Mahatma Gandhi says in Hind Swaraj. Good travels at a snail's pace. It can therefore have little to do with the railways. Those who want to do good are not selfish. They are not in a hurry. They know that to impregnate people with good requires a long time, but evil has wings. To build a house takes time. Its destruction takes none. So the railways can become a distributing agency for the evil one only. It may be a debatable matter whether railways spread famines, but it's beyond dispute that they propagate evil. So this is something very interesting I found in Hind Swaraj. And it's not perhaps surprising that when we talk about things that spread very fast, we usually think of things like wildfire, bubonic plague, COVID, and not any other holy or sacred things. But be that at a more philosophical or a conceptual level, at a practical level, it's nice that a very pragmatic exercise of this case has been undertaken. And what I find very special about this exercise is that usually when people talk about research and agriculture or sustainable agriculture, it looks like there's a divide between the doers and the thinkers. The doers are supposed to be NGOs or field people who slog away. They can barely keep track of the data and they are molded by ideological considerations and so on. And then there are the thinkers who come along to the university, who design things, who execute experiments, who record the data and write their PhD thesis. Usually these are like two different worlds. And sometimes the people from the field want to have a discussion about methodology or the structure of the study. They are usually, the response from the thinkers is either bewilderment or outrage, saying that that's supposed to be his domain. Here is something very interesting, that across the geography of India in so many different locations, a detailed and meticulous field study has been undertaken. And in the design of the study, in the implementation of the study, in the discussion of the conclusions, the way it has been drawn, there has been an active partnership and participation of the field people, and that's what makes it very special. So I'm very happy to be part of this panel today, and let me introduce you to a very distinguished panel. So the structure of this session is going to be that I am now introduce the 4 panelists who are with us today. And then afterwards, we'll have Mr. Shiva making a 20-minute overview summary presentation of the chief findings of the sustainable agriculture in India, why does it not scale up report. After this presentation, we requested each of the panelists to take about 10 minutes time, each of them, to speak on the theme, to respond to the presentation, to add to it, or depart from it to some extent to speak their views on it. Afterwards, I'll be speaking my own views, and then hopefully you'll have time to throw this open to the audience for a discussion. So I'm happy to get this launched and to introduce you. First of all, this the first panelist is Mr. Zulfikar Haider, who is currently the Chief Strategy and Program Officer at Azim Premji Philanthropic Initiatives based out of Bangalore. And he has been, his specialties include local governance, capacity development, institution building, and livelihoods. Then we have with us Mr. Elton Mudziavivi. He is currently working as program manager at IKEA Foundation, and he is based out of the Netherlands. And he is an agribusiness and market development expert with vast experience in the area of program management, value chain, including market developments, and so on. And then we have with us Dr. Chitor Guha Sarkar. Now, Chitor Guha Sarkar is currently heading the agriculture division of the Tata Trust. In genetics and breeding, technology, technology knowledge, and about 20 years work experience in different roles and responsibilities, including senior level leadership roles with many agri-input multinationals. And then finally, we have Shiva Muthu Prakash, who has undertaken and coordinated this research. Shiva is a researcher based at VikasAnvesh Foundation at Pune. He was also Lok Sabha Research Fellow in the years 2018 to 20. He has done a PhD on farm indicators from CTD or Sitara in IIT Bombay. And a long time back, I also had the pleasant experience of having him work with me very briefly at the Center for Indian Knowledge Systems as my colleague. So welcome to all the people who are registered participants. Welcome to all the panelists. And I now request Shiva to go ahead and make the presentation of the summary of the report. Shiva, you have the floor, please.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Are the slides visible?
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
Yeah.
Yes, I can see them. Yeah, fine.
Okay. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, panelists and chair and participants who are joining the discussion. Like Professor Hansalkar have introduced, so this was started to understand that, and even Dr. Balu have suggested about the same. Like when so much good about agroecological farming is there, why isn't it not scaling up? I mean, we visit a farm and the organic farmer or someone so, and we don't really get to see the neighboring people really picking up from them. So this was a single question which, yeah, I mean, obviously many people are trying to answer, and we have been trying to figure out from our field studies and field work areas. So this was sort of coordinated by myself, Vaishnavi Pawar and Sashank, who are my colleagues in VikasAnvesh Foundation. So this is going to be the brief content of the work. I'll just, in 15, 20 minutes, I'll just run through uh, some background of various organic input practices across the country, and then methods in sampling, then key findings and summary, and then few perception and perspectives from the farmers themselves. So yeah, I mean, while we started, we wanted to sort of cover cutting across various aspects of farming, including, for example, SRI, system of rice intensification, or any agricultural practices which is going to help in reducing the risk of the farmers, or let's say increasing the efficiency of water use, or anything per se coming across that line. So we didn't want to restrict only with per se to organic farming or I mean any particular farming practices. So while we started in such a way, but then we happened to, out of the 11 states which we have covered, about 9 of them are very much focused upon organic inputs. So the way we define this particular practices is like agroecological practices is a subset of sustainable agriculture, and organic input practices, let's say FIM or liquid manures or the leaf extracts, whichever it may be. So as again a subset of the agroecological practices. So that's how we have sort of defined this work, I mean sustainable agriculture for this study per se. I'll just start with this disclaimer. And I mean some basic background on numbers. So basically, our FOM input to the farms across the country has been decreasing and drastically gone down almost by half. Like if you see about 30 years back, so this is not the recent numbers per se. We are not at the 2015 census has been done, but the data is not out. So I have used the data which is the last 4 census data, input census data. So it has decreased from about 1.5 I mean, the organic inputs, the major organic input, which is the farmyard manure, has decreased from about 1.5 ton per hectare to about 0.7. But at the same time, you see the other chemical inputs, it has increased, but nevertheless, the yield per se has sort of not increased to the level of what the chemical inputs has been increasing. So probably the reason behind is the decrease in this farmyard manure, the organic inputs. So many studies are there. I mean, technical studies conducted by the IRA and the ICAR, everyone. So 30 long experiments have quite clearly proved that organic inputs are so critical for our soil health as well as the sustained productivity. But still, what's happening in our system, it's like if you see from 2001 to 2011, this map sort of shows that how much of the cultivated cropped area is being treated with farmyard manure. So in 2011, we had about at least few states had more than 50% of the farm were being treated with farmyard manure. But then when it comes to 2011, it is drastically reduced. Hardly 2-3 states have more than 50%. Just 2-3 states have more than 50% of their total cultivated land treated with organic inputs. So that's where we thought like we should really more focus more onto the organic inputs, not really so much larger scope. So yeah, I mean now I just get into our work of how we designed the study. So we were quite, I mean, in the beginning of the study itself, we didn't want to get into the numbers and getting into the details of the farming practices and everything. So we made sure that we are covering more into the qualitative aspects, and we are not getting the numbers per se, but more about the trends. Whether after someone is adopting a particular practice, organic inputs, how the yields has gone, whether it has decreased or increased. So we have tried to capture just the trends and basically using nominal scale or ordinal scale. So that's where the method part is. And we try to capture mainly 4 or 5 aspects with respect to the farming as well as the farmers. So one is about the motivation, the second is about the knowledge and adoption of different practices, and third is about the experiences on adopting the practices and challenges, and at last the gender and the divisions. So the current report really doesn't cover about this. We are hoping to come up with a gender focused participation and their role in the sustainable agriculture in a couple of more months. So hopefully we'll share that soon. And all these things, whatever I'm going to share now, it's going to be in proportion of sample farmers, mainly the first two, the motivation part and the knowledge and adoption part, is going to be based on the proportion of sampled farmers. But the remaining aspects are very much into the responded farmers. We didn't want to account the farmers who are not aware of a particular practice to comment about that particular practice. So that's where we changed from sample farmers to responded farmers. So I'll not really get into the details further. So this was an initiative by more than about 10 different entities joined, and we covered about 620 farmers across 11 states. And the results which I'm going to show is going to be very much for 10 states. The Bihar state had some issue with our data. The way it was being conveyed. So we sort of skipped Bihar, and the entire results is going to be for the remaining 10 states. So just briefly about the farmer profile. So about 20% of the sample we covered was women farmers, and about 2/3 of the total sample didn't had any secondary occupation per se, in the sense like they either do or farming or they go for labor. So majority of them solely dependent on agriculture, essentially. And then the third one is about half of them are less than 40 years of age, and half of them are more than 40 years of age. Coming to the farm profile, it quite reflects, at least the land holding quite reflects our overall country's trend. About 2/3 of them are marginal and small scale farmers, and about 70%, over 70% is irrigated. Yeah, here maybe I think if you go with the national trend, it might be a little less, but then our sample had about 70 to 80% of them having access to irrigation. And our sample had a distribution of, organic, conventional, and partly organic. So 30% were completely organic. They never use chemicals and pesticides. And about 40 of them were quite, they don't practice complete organic at all. The remaining were in transition, which essentially means that if someone has more than 50% of their land and they're completely organic, they are classified as majorly organic. And if they are less than 50%, then they are kept as partly organic. So that's how we sort of classified. That's a basically profile of farm and farmers. So coming to the findings, the motivation was quite similar across the states. So the key motivation is basically the human health and soil health. The level of association with each of them varied. For example, when it comes to Punjab, most of them had a personal experience of some health issue and concern. So that's why they moved on to moved on to organic farming. But when it comes to same motivation, human health, but when it comes to Jharkhand or Odisha, it was not so much the personal experience. It's more an intuition and based on their awareness they have adopted, and the reason mainly because of the human health and soil health aspects. So after that, I'll move on to the knowledge and adoption. So from especially the knowledge and adoption and the challenges, I'm going to cover it in perspective of different states. So I'm not going to elaborate about each and every state how the trends has been. The report elaborates those things in detail. So I'm going to brief you more on the overall sample, and within that we have two varying trends or very clear contrasting trends across different states. So one is here when it comes to the knowledge and adoption, it's states like Odisha, Sikkim, and Jharkhand. They are very bad or very poor in terms of knowledge per se. So more less than 30% had any sort of exposure or knowledge to the key practices like liquid manure, leaf extracts, or vermicompost or green manuring. They do appreciate or they do understand about composting and FAM, but then I'll come to some issue. Basically, majority of the sample, they weren't really able to differentiate so much about FAM and compost. In fact, that was one of the major attention we want to bring in. So they don't appreciate the key advantage of composting, weed management. So most of them have a notion that we have we have some dump yard, we store them throughout the year, and when we just put it back to the farm. So that's how they're understanding. They don't really differentiate composting as and simple farmyard manure. So more than 80% of all the sample had a understanding, and they've been using farmyard manure or compost, but then without a clear differentiation between those two. But when it comes to the other practices, this graph, if you see, the dark green shows this the knowledge part for Jharkhand, Odisha, and Sikkim. So it's all of them less than 30% over here. And when it comes to the other states, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Punjab, or Gujarat, their knowledge and exposure has been quite well, quite more than 80%. And then the adoption rate is, it's sort of same across all the states. And particularly the green manuring has been very low compared to other practices. So that's the sort of trend we understood from the in adoption and knowledge per se. When it comes to the experience, I think it's not so surprising for most. Cost of cultivation has been decreasing in most of the cases, and the labor and drudgery has been reported little, increase. So this particular column is going to be the increase. And when it comes to the crop yield, usually we have this notion of a debate about how it is working, and it's quite evidently showing that half of them has reported as decrease and half of them has, equal proportion has sort of reported both the ways. And the remaining aspects like net income or price realization are largely has been reported to be increased. So since the focus of the entire study was quite onto the challenges part, I'll take little time on this. So one is about this difference across the states. So one is the eastern states. All the eastern states again over here it's going to be Odisha, Jharkhand, Sikkim, and that of and Assam as well here. So the major challenges over here is about the irrigation constraint, then lack of knowledge, institutional support, and then pest management and even the access to inputs. So contrastingly, the other states, the major challenges over there is about marketing challenges or price realization, or then comes the drudgery, weed management, and then the low yield. So this clear contrasting thing has really come out and sort of says and asks for a two-pronged approach when it comes to implementation. So even within this, when I was mentioning about the adoption and differentiation of this FAM and compost, the weed management comes out to be the one of the highest. So it is not getting reflected directly here. So it appears to be the major constraint across the states. So that's where it's like 45% being reported in eastern states and about 70% in the other states. So that's why one of the recommendation we are sort of saying about the importance of composting amid the FIM by itself. So the second aspect when it comes to the challenges, we want to flag upon the difference in perception of conventional farmers and the organic farmers. This particular table sort of shows that the conventional farmers or the least organic farmers have been quite clearly saying about the challenges and the perception. They say that marketing or the price realization or the yield are the major barriers for them to really get into organic farming itself. But when it comes to the purely organic, completely organic farmers, they have been quite comfortable, and they are the least when it comes to any challenges. But within that, the transition, the people who are partly practicing organic, they are very much commenting the labor, treasury related aspects as the major challenges. So this is like we saw one about the general across the states, and then we saw about the different, I mean, categories of farmers. And I mean, we thought like we particularly had a question about whether their association with the FPO, because the FPO has been the quite a top of these days. So how that is really affecting their perception of these practices. So interestingly, the marketing, which is apparently coming out to be one of the major challenges, has been cited quite more by the farmers who have actually the association with the FPOs. So that in fact led us to another question, that how much benefit they are receiving from such collectives association. And it so appeared that most of the collectives and even the field agencies are quite focusing into the input support, and they are least the farmers are least benefited from the collectives when it comes to the marketing linkage. But then it's so much either the marketing and the capacity building are the major two constraints, but then the benefits they seem to receive from the agencies are quite limited when it comes to these two aspects. So these are the two or three things which I would want to really highlight to summarize. One is about the human health and the soil health aspect, is which is the mutation part. That's quite sort of an I mean known aspect. And when it comes to the experience, the yield is sort of having a mixed response. But when it comes to the challenges part, it's quite different in different places. And I mean, the capacity building and the marketing part happens to be the major constraint. And just to share I mean, prelude of this study, we had a stakeholder meeting in a Kisan Sammelan which happened in Ahmedabad. So there we had about 45 people from different, I mean, places, from the bureaucrats, from the academicians, even the development workers, farmers, and everyone. They had this notion of that. I mean, when we gave them an option, three options, whether these organic input practices are not getting scaled up just because of there is no enough support. Is that reason? And second reason is about the technology by itself is being constrained with the technicalities. Or the third is about the farmers are not motivated and they are not. So quite a lot of majority came up with this answer of farmers are not able to picking up. They are not willing to do it. But then it's so quite very clearly illustrated here that it's not really the operational challenges faced by the farmers. It's more about the input support as well as the marketing linkage they would want to have to really adopt these practices. So with that, I just close this. And if we have a couple of more minutes time, I'll just share a couple of incidents shared from our I mean, field experience. So I'll just take one when we go to Punjab, there is a very clear, I mean, remark made by many of these farmers saying that when we start adopting these practices, our neighboring farmers starts sort of mocking at us, saying that why do you want to really get into such a hard work or something of that? So, I mean, laborious work, and you don't know, while everything can be done at an ease, why you want to take so much effort and that to incurring some loss at least at the initial stages. And the same works with the family as well. So there is a huge pressure at their side as well. Why you want to go through some loss before, if at all, to specialize on organic farming per se. So that is one part. And when it comes to Sikkim, so I mean, there is this notion that it's an organic state and the government has banned it. So no farmer is willing to really speak about chemicals per se. But then yet they are having so much challenge in really having any particular capacity building activity or any training to deal with how I mean they can manage in the absence of the chemicals. So that is one of the key challenges cited by them. And when it comes to, for example, Jharkhand, they say that uh, those days kids were in going to school and we are able to manage the livestock very well. But now everyone is going to school and we don't have manpower to really do this. I mean, livestock management. So such a diverse set of constraints, and it's not that I have mentioned so many things, such things are there, but then I have tried to highlight few of the sort of representative sort of comments given by them. And for example, the Andhra Pradesh farmer, if you see that the tenancy becomes a constraint for them to really move on to the organic farming. So they need to keep. So this is not just reflected only in Andhra Pradesh. This have, I mean, quite a few farmers have said the same in Punjab as well. So similar instances happens, and when you see this Maharashtra, when you need to have a very planned set of practice when it comes to organic farming. So that is again becoming another constraint when it really see from the perspective of the farmers as such. So I mean, these are, I thought I should sort of share a few of the instances from there. And this is just to give a glimpse of genders. So interestingly, the majority of work is done by women, but then it so happens the men cites most of the challenges at a higher level compared to the women. And the women's major challenge, they say, it's about they don't have enough knowledge, and the second is about they don't have enough water to do more crops. So those are the two key things when it comes to women. And interestingly, I mean, when we were doing a field work, just to share it last one experience. So we were accompanied by the field staff and the couple of women in Odisha. This was happened in Odisha. So there, they felt that two resource person have come, and couple of people came with couple of some straw material with them, and they inquired about like how to make mushroom cultivation. Can you explain how to make a base for mushroom cultivation? And within few minutes, about 20 women joined the entire group, and it almost became a resource training sort of session. And so such was the desperation of the women to sort of know new practices when it comes to Odisha and Jharkhand. So yeah, I think I close it over here. I mean, I'll be happy to answer some. If I'm too fast, just I'm sorry about it. More details on the report. Thank you.
So thank you, Shiva, for that nice snapshot, which gave a bird's eye view of what you have done and key conclusions. I see that there are a set of comments. There are also some question and answers. I just urged all the participants also to make sure that the hosts have uploaded the report in the website. And please do take the opportunity to go through that report if you have not already gone through it. So we'll go ahead with the proposed structure for this discussion. Namely, I now invite the first panelist, Mr. Zulfikar, to share his comments, which may be in the nature of questions, suggestions, or his own thoughts on the theme. Zulfikar, you have the floor. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Balu. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Siva, for your summary. I read the whole report, so I found it quite, I mean, interesting and insightful. I think the divide between the some of the states in the east, Jharkhand, Orissa, versus some of the other states is interesting and worth exploring deeper as to what's behind this. For me, one of the things that was insightful was the question of weed management, which and the lack of use of green manuring as something that is not happening across the country. I think it hints at what is the degree of adaptation of the different sort of package of practices across the sector. I'm going to talk about some, drawing from the experience of natural farming in Andhra and few other NGO-led efforts in the country, which I have engaged with over a period of time, and trying to sort of share some other insights, as well as parallelly try and address some of the things that came up in this report. And yeah. I mean, one of the things that seems to be a big barrier to scaling, and I'm using agroecological farming as a frame, we could say sustainable agriculture, is that there continues to be a significant negative perception around agroecological farming. The perception is that this is going to lead to productivity loss, at least in the first few years, if not on a longer basis. increase in drudgery, labor requirement is going to go up. At some point or the other, we have to take recourse to spray chemical insecticide because it becomes difficult. And then, of course, you have the larger thing that, oh, we cannot, feed the nation by using agroecological farming. We have to, go to chemical intensive agriculture. Interesting case in point is I think last week or rather a few days back, Business Standard has carried an advertisement. I believe it's from a consortium of pesticide and agribusiness companies, which is, the audacity of it is quite, unbelievable. The way it has been done. It's an ad which with accusation to lots of people, and it's intriguing as to why it is happening now. Is the climate in the country currently such that there is possibly an ascendancy of greater attention on agroecological and other such practices? But to come back to the point that if there is a larger discourse, especially by the people who are supposed to be knowledge bearers, the agriculture scientists, the university faculty, the graduates in agriculture universities, what are they being taught? And if by and large they carry an opposite and negative view, it has a signaling effect, and I think it does affect the confidence of farmers and the risk appetite that they carry. Imagine an agriculture extension officer coming to your field and saying something very different than what a peer of the farmer who is practicing agroecological approaches is telling. It's going to leave the farmer confused. So I think there's something that needs to be done over there. There are countries which have like very long, I know about Switzerland having some close to 65 years to 70 years of time series data on organic farming. I don't know why. I mean, I'm sure it's available to some of our scientists. Maybe some of you here have it. But aren't there, these findings that can be brought to bear in debates within our country? And of course, we need to launch our own, research and studies which are deep. If we have a policy environment which is stacked differently and it's not necessarily supportive of agroecological or sustainable agriculture, with that lack of alignment, it's going to be a big barrier. Most schemes and policies in government are not necessarily in favor of agroecology. I think farmers fear losing out on things like bank loans, crop insurance, like there are government programs like Andhra has this Raitu Bharosa program. I'm not sure. I'll have to study that. Do farmers, my sense is farmers sense a risk that they're going to lose out on some of these benefits. And as I said, agriculture extension, large number of people in the agriculture department at universities are aligned very differently. So something needs to shift over there. I think there is value in talking of farmer well-being and not just focusing on saying, are you producing enough to feed the nation, or just focus on yield? Because what about the cost side? And Siva, your study also shows that one of the great key motivation for farmers to moving to sustainable agriculture is human health and soil health concerns, which is quite amazing. People are, I have heard farmers talk about them being custodians of the earth, of the soil. That's a very different order of motivation. One sees in many places. It's quite remarkable and I think inspirational as well. Yeah. The other thing is that, so if we look at all of these things, how the alignment needs to happen between programs and schemes of the government, which they need to be supportive of sustainable agriculture. You have the wider ecosystem of the knowledge bearers. I think for large scale transition to agroecology, I think we will need the backing of the state, and the backing needs to be sustained for a period of time, and therefore we require a certain kind of a longer policy, political commitment. These are critical. It is happening in a few states, and I think we can see the impact of it. For a farmer to transition to agroecology, Siva, you talked about say 30% of adoption rate of knowledge. I'm wondering whether it's a snapshot, and does it also talk about people, say people who are in, partial adopter? Is it a transitory phenomena or is it a steady state they have reached? Our experience in Andhra is suggesting, and I mean the experience is mainly the government of Andhra Pradesh and our civil society partners there, is that it might take 4 to 5 years for a farmer to really transition and mature in the practices. So the adoption level of practices also kind of changes over a period of time. We may have to track cohorts of farmers as a result. Um, so so I, yeah, so I think a large government kind of announcement of intent, which creates that kind of ecosystem, announcing it from the pulpits by the government, saying this is the direction they're going. Hopefully, if it is followed up by some alignment in terms of their schemes and other programs, which are then more supportive of agroecology, these things are going to build the trust and a sense of confidence in the farmers to take that leap. Usually the transition is happening with farmers adopting a say quarter acre, half acre, experimenting, learning by doing, and then slowly they kind of move forward. I think there has been a one of the barriers the research also says is that it's considered very complex, some of these sustainable agriculture practices. I think we need to think about the 80-20 rule. Have those key set of practices, which I mean, in statistic, I think we call it the R value. If you have a set of practices which can account for 70 to 80% of the entire results, can we focus on them? Keep it a little simple. Can we sort of standardize some things? Of course, I mean, agriculture, you can't standardize because agroecological conditions are extremely varied, soil types, everything, micro climates are different. So you will have to have necessarily all those kind of adaptations required, but still, to what extent can we simplify? That will be important. Finally, it's the proof of the pudding is in farmers doing it and learning, and I think there's a critical mass needed of farmers who kind of change. I don't know what that critical mass is, but people have been talking about 10% of farmers transitioning. Our finding in Andhra is that if you focus on clusters or villages and hope for 60 to 80% adoption rates there, the results are likely to be irreversible. The people will not slip back. So, that's the I think governments also need to kind of run these kind of programs as a large mission. It of course requires significant resources, because within a short period of time you want to create that kind of a transition. Some observation at the farmer level that we found, I think people saying that this is complex, or I think the farmers' expectations from farming or the amount of time they deploy in farming is varied. Maybe the eastern state and the other state example also is hinting at it. But in agroecological agriculture, one constraint, especially if you look at the labor dynamics, is the nature of the labor or nature of the effort that is needed. There's a lot of observations, simply being there in the field, observing, watching, seeing how things are changing, rather than saying I have sprayed a pesticide and then I can then visit my farm 10 days later and it is all right. It's changing the dynamics. You can't hire a labor for watching a farm and observing. People hire labor for specific activities. So things are fairly different. Medium and large farmers, their opportunity cost is, calculations are going to be very different. So again, and they depend on hired labor, but you can't hire labor for watching and observing a farm. So I think there is something out there which will require resolution over a period of time. I don't think we have the answer to that. One comment I have is that there was a talk about, like, increase better market linkages, better price realization. I think we should investigate it over a period of time. Of course, it's a valid expectation, and it will definitely boost in greater scaling up of agroecological farming. But is this expectation a real and a viable one? Global experience in organic agriculture suggests that over a period of time, price in the market, the shelf level, in the retail level, seems to equalize between most of these products. And in a country like India, where the market is very price sensitive, I think on a longer term, for a short term, maybe it will be different, but on long term, I think it's not a good expectation to be set. Worth checking. Yeah. Simple things, other thing which we are observing is, when we talk about that the jury is out in terms of yield and productivity, that 50% feel it's increasing or lowering. I think we need to think about crop intensity as well. Secondly, once you have polycrop and multi-level crops, it's a very different kind of a scenario. We may need to track and study productivity levels over a period of time, at least within the organic farming or the agroecological communities. Most people's claims are that over a period of time, labor requirement falls down. So maybe we need some longitudinal studies on labor deployment, as well as studies to look at cropping intensity. I think the country's average is, I think, 1.3, 1.35. Agroecological practices can, transition it to up close to 2. And yeah, we may also then need kind of farm machinery and equipment which is actually serving the needs of polycropping kind of models. Right now, most of them it is for monocrop models, so it doesn't work. The problem of the tenant farmer, duration of lease of land. If it is short, farmers, the person who is the tenant is unlikely to invest in the land, and therefore unlikely to transition to sustainable agriculture. I think we all understand that. So can we do something on tenure of lease that can make things different? Can we get the price right? And I'm now talking about things like externalities: water pollution, health hazard, harm to biodiversity, greenhouse gas emissions. These are right now mostly externalities. On top of it, we are supporting it, say, with the agriculture, fertilizer subsidy, which is, if I remember correctly, a current figure is probably 80,000 crores direct subsidy, but it's given at the level of production to the factories which produce. Wonder if we changed it to a direct benefit transfer at the farmer level, and then the farmer has a choice what he or she would like to use those monies for. I think we can change the the economics of it, or the incentive structures of farming. What is the other one barrier I see is the tendency, especially in state-driven programs, and I'm talking now of not just agriculture but many others, to declare success too early and not having critical feedback loops. The tendency of the political imperative is to declare success fast. Bureaucracies have that tendency, and I think that's a huge risk, because this requires patient effort and over a longer period of time. I think the involvement of universities, civil society is a good idea to tie oneself in such professional organizations into such programs, so that there is evidence, there is feedback that comes in. Water as a focus. I think the potential of water saving through agroecology is something that requires study, and I think can we try and then bring it into conversations about price, subsidy, and incentive. Soil carbon sequestration, the potential of agroecological agriculture to to sequester carbon, it's quite huge. India, the soil carbon levels are very low, and this is probably one of the cheapest route to achieve carbon sequestration. And given the global concerns, can we capitalize on this? That's one part. The last point I would like to make is that we need to produce strong evidence, strong documentation, high quality research, third party evaluations and various programs, and so that over a period of time we can change the wider perceptions about sustainable agriculture. We will need the ecosystem. It's not just farmer to farmer extension. Farmer to farmer extension is proving probably is a fantastic model. You're building on the knowledge of farmers and the trust another farmer has on a peer, rather than hearing it from some agriculture officer. But we will need those experts. We will need the high capability human resources as well. So where are our universities and research centers which are generating those kind of human resources? Thank you. Thanks, Pal. I'll stop.
Thank you, Zulfikar. I now invite the next panelist, Mr. Elton Mudziavi of IKEA Foundation. Elton, please, you have the floor. Is from Netherlands. Thanks.
Thanks, Bala, and thanks, Siva, for quite an interesting and insightful research. The field of sustainable agriculture has been lacking quite a lot in terms of research, and so any research that comes at this point is quite a great step in the right direction. But before I dive into the research, let me start briefly by talking about my organization, IKEA Foundation. So our mission is to create better life for children. That's what we exist to do. And with our agricultural livelihoods programs, we would like to contribute to that mission by enabling families to be able to grow sustainable livelihoods from agriculture, but doing so while protecting the planet. As of now, our focus is more on East Africa and India with our agricultural livelihoods programs. And we strongly believe that livelihoods do not have to come at the expense of the planet, but it is possible to achieve sustainable livelihoods within sustainable boundaries of our environment. And our theory of change has three key interlinked aspects where we would like to see agricultural value chains being inclusive, so really benefiting those who are living in poverty. We would like to see agricultural systems running based on secular principles. And lastly, to see agricultural production systems becoming what we call regenerative. And it is this regenerative aspect that I would like to bring forward, because that is where there are plenty of overlaps with agroecology and organic agriculture. By regenerative, we simply mean a system that restores, an agricultural system that restores and builds the health of soils, biodiversity, and restoring ecosystem functions, such as water, air, and others. In other words, it's a system that ensures that we give back to nature more, as well as the society, we give back to nature and society more than what we take out from it. So as I look at this research, I say, so why does this research matter to us? From the current developments in the world, you will see that we are currently facing a multiplicity of challenges: climate change, food security crisis, health crisis, and inequality. And often we hear about agriculture being a major driver of most of these crises, but it is also, we now know that it can be a major contributor to solving these crises. it was really interesting, a pleasant surprise to see actually that of the farmers that were interviewed in this study, their topmost motivations were that they would like to contribute to human and soil health. And so that is the message that the world really needs to catch on if we are to be able to sustain or to scale the sustainable agriculture. And it is because of this crisis that we at Akia Foundation believe that the solution is in transforming agriculture into one that works for people as well as the environment. And that the business case for regenerative agriculture, for agroecology, for organic agriculture must encapsulate these two, for people as well as for environment. And India is a place where we see signs of momentum in terms of transition to regenerative agriculture or agroecology. But through this research, we see that there is still a lot to do. But it is interesting to see that there is somewhere to start from. The key thing that I want to bring in here is from the discussion, from the presentation, is in form of a question to say, what is the business case for regenerative agriculture? What is the business case for agroecology? What is the business case for organic agriculture? This study, for instance, spotlights that the route to market is a key part of that business case. Markets were found to be a missing piece, yet we know it is a driving incentive or enabler of adoptions and even incentivizing investments. If scaling is to be expected at farmer level, for instance, because the business case doesn't only need to be at farmer level, it has to prove the business case is to encompass environment, and to encompass what it does to farmer levels livelihoods, what it does to also the others who are part of the agri value chain. But if we expect scaling on the ground at farmer level, then the business case for farmers, including those who are considering transition to regenerative practices, must be very clear. But I'm happy to note that there is an emerging business case here. For instance, when we see reduced costs of crop cultivation, it's part of the business case. It's what makes the story interesting. And increasing net farm incomes are also part of what seems to be an emerging business case here. But again, there are issues that are still to be resolved for it to be a solid business case. Things like drudgery, challenges like route to market. These are things that need to be addressed. At the IKEA Foundation, we and our partners are working on programs that are prototyping different regenerative models, specifically focusing on answering that question of what is the business case of regenerative agriculture. I think for farmers, agroecology, organic farming, and regenerative agriculture must promise farmers increased profitability, diverse revenue streams, more stable supply and markets. And it's quite diverse. The farmers that I talked to, one farmer actually came up to me and said, in Ethiopia, one of the things that motivate me is that I want to make this farm successful so that I will be able to successfully transfer it to my children. It's part of what motivates, what makes them tick. So it's part of what could come up as a business case for them. We have seen also from the findings that knowledge, there's still quite a lot to do around knowledge. Surprisingly, I got to learn about the successes and the strides that India is making through, on organic and agroecology, through the case of Sikkim, which is known as, which has been presented to the world, or we have known in the Sikkim case as one of the key success stories of organic agriculture. But surprising now to see actually that less than 30% of the surveyed farmers reported to have knowledge of the various organic practices. There is still work to do around that. Similarly on crop diversification, because if crop diversification is not changing or is actually going down, what that might suggest is that perhaps some of the practices or around monocultures, organic monocultures, could be creeping in, which also go against creating diversified and resilient agricultural systems. There are plenty of areas of rays of hope and actually excitement that this report brings out, particularly that some of the challenges are not unique to agroecology farmers or organic farmers. They also actually even more affect conventional farmers. And so there is great deal of opportunity there, especially also that the jury is still out on yields that counters the narrative that if we take regenerative agriculture, if we take agroecology, then we are not going to be able to feed an increased population, world population from sustainable or regenerative agriculture. Let me conclude by pointing out a few areas that I think require attention. Just as the approach to this study, where there were consultations with bureaucrats, CSO professionals, academicians, lead farmers and agri-professionals, plus voice of farmers, which is bringing in a multi-hectare voice and consulting and action. We require a lot more collaboration for us to be able to accelerate regenerative agriculture instead of competition. And that must be the same also with public and private stakeholders. Partnerships that actually means coordinating efforts in harmonizing approaches and maximizing, that seeks to maximize impact and leveraging resources. For philanthropies like and like-minded, like IKEA Foundation, I think we have a role to play in terms of influencing the shift towards from the short-term funding models that often force implementing organizations to tend to quick fix, quick return technology drive solutions. Instead, moving towards long-term layered initiatives that contribute to long-term programs and that do sustain and build upon momentum of the previous programs. There is still quite a great deal of knowledge, research on and knowledge systems to do, because we all understand regenerative agriculture, organic agroecology is quite knowledge intensive. It adds a lot of complexity to the current ways of farming, and therefore there shouldn't be a deficiency of knowledge for farmers who make a tough decision to transition to sustainable agriculture. And so I would like to end by saying, from IKEA Foundation, we are always looking for organizations that have innovative ideas to look both at landscape level and from system level. How can we build the ecosystem around agriculture in order to build one ecosystem that enables, instead of stifle, the scaling of regenerative agriculture, which encompasses agroecology and organic agriculture. I will stop at this. Yeah.
Your mic is mute.
Balu, your mic is mute.
Thank you, Dr. Elton, for sharing your thoughts. And I now request Dr. Chitor Guha Sarkar of Tata Trust to share his views. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, and very good evening to all the participants, and also to Dr. Bansalkar, the eminent panelists that have spoken about the report that has been shared by Dr. Shiva and his team. I would like to start to say that it's been going through the report and the presentation. It's been a comprehensive work that has been done for a very important topic, no doubt. Because the topic itself, as you said, is the problem statement to understand why sustainable agriculture is not taking off and flying as we hope and we expect and would be willing to like to see it. I think I would like to, before I brief my talk on, and I would like to restrict it on the report and whatever the data that was generated and shared. As on behalf of the Data Trust, I would like to alleviate poverty and improve the above into the society so that they have empowerment and equality across the spectrum of the human race that we are in. So I think this, and in this, when we talk about the livelihoods program, agriculture is a key component to all of this that actually plays the biggest part in this change. So this topic is very relevant and eminent to be worked upon. And as and which, if we look at how the history of agriculture has progressed, whatever we are today are in the behest, so the gift of our previous generations that have actually given us the freedom and the foundation to build upon what we are today. And it is the onus of us as individuals and farmers and responsible human beings to, I think, pass it on to the next generation in the most sustainable way that we can take this forward for lifelong things. So in the context of the report that was published, I think I appreciate that the data set cut across the different segments of society with respect to the farming land holdings, the irrigation potential, the gender equality looked about half and half in that also. So I think the data set had a very good coverage of getting a good get an idea of what actually is going down on the ground. So I think I appreciate you for that. And if I have to go in specifics of the results, I think most of the things have been covered by my other panelists a bit in pretty detail. So I would like to repeat that. But other than that, if I looked at the three key interventions that were coming out from that report from Dr. Shiva, is technology, interventions, and farmers. So three spectrums that were built in to get the insights of what they felt about the sustainable agriculture, and not I don't want to bring it down into the organic and semi-organic, and I think your data had everyone to speak about what they had, and I think there was a mixture of group doing both conventional and organic. So that also gave you the insights of what is coming in their mind. The 3-4 things that were key coming out, and if I looked at all the data points that were graded from a point of scaling, one point which actually struck out was most of the cases, most of the points had already 0.5 or higher scales that were actually put out there. So and for most of the interventions or the questionnaires that were asked on these three heads. So I think it gives enough base to do some more deep diving into that data, and also break it up into in which segment or which sector of the data sets, if it's coming from the higher irrigated plots or it's just coming from the gender differences, that we can do more insights as to see what really is the cause behind the problems. I think there are always cross-cutting interventions to be challenges, which is also coming out. So no doubt about the output marketing, the input marketing, collectivity, as you talked about, the FPOs, which is one of the key things which I think a success of any technology can take off, be it from the agri sector, be it from any other sector. So there's the point of taking up to scales and the collectiveness, for which actually would again solve the other issues of getting the price realization, getting inputs at a lower cost, the bargaining power, taking these technologies forward. And vis-a-vis, we also have to understand when it's on the ground, it will be compared with the existing technologies which are on the ground, which is in this case would be the conventional or the chemical farming or intensive farming. So this is something which you cannot play off. So we have to, as from the knowledge part, also give them confidence and demonstrate that with them, that yes. And I think it is also being done with different levels. And I think the data also shows that you have a fair degree of 50-50 chances, saying that we don't see a problem on the yield. We see a better realization on the input cost. So all in all, if you take a farmer household together, for him, if the input cost is coming down, his yield is matching that of the conventional, if not better, the return of investment should be better to him. So I think that should be a motivation factor which should be looked into, if that is going to be there. And I think your data sets are only about 1 year old. So I think it maybe need some more study in depth, because some of the respondents may be just first users and they may not have seen. And we know these technologies take some time to realize the actual benefit. But there are some things which are also coming out that needs to be taken into consideration in a deeper thought, because the point of labor and its scarcity with respect to time, availability, and cost in agriculture fields today, be it conventional farming, high intensive farming, or subsistence farming, or any farming for that matter, is a rare resource, and it is going to be bad. It's going bad to worse day by day. From a cost perspective, time availability perspective, and the fact that agriculture itself needs a little bit of more commitment, and it's a more arduous task to be on the field than compared to the other professions that may be around as a choice. So that needs to be more incentivized with respect to knowledge, to see the farmers see the best output out of that. And I think it will come from collective efforts with what is going on. The only point that I thought would add value to this, and that's bringing in the example of Tata Trust working on in the Central India initiative of Lakpati Kisan. So there also, it's about increasing the income levels through sustainable agriculture practices. But in that, what is added upon is the layering with livestock and other interventions among the households that actually not only build up the capacity of the households to improve their income over the years and over the years, but also adds to subsistence farming, because at the point of your start itself, we know that the resources are degrading, even from a land perspective or livestock perspective, which actually contributes to the organic or the inputs that come in for subsistence farming. So I think, in a way, if the approach is thought to the farmer or brought to the farmer in that way, I think that would add more value to the farmer, to see that he would plug in some of the gaps that probably he has today from input availability or regeneration at his own field or farm. And also the fact that I think there may be more opportunity or chances when there is a collective approach through the FPO model and getting more farmers together to do this type of farming. The input industry would also have a space from their business perspective and scale up perspective to get it to those farmers. And then it's a win-win situation for all. And then that helps out into the overall thematic area of the sustainable farming scaling up. These things may take time, because it had taken time for the sustainable farming approaches. I won't say sustainable farming, but farming approaches to change to what it is today. And probably the fact of today being a concern on the soil, the water, the environment, the human health itself, has become because of reasons of over exploiting it. There may be a inverted comma factor of an over exploitation which has happened, which needs to be curtailed down and again brought back to a midway path that probably would have both a sustained approach to the farm itself, and also added practices that would help out, along with the technology space that may be needed in this to take out some of the pain points which the farmer is going through, which has come out through your report. Even when there is more automation happening or more machinery work coming into the farm of doing things differently, if there is areas to actually also work with those partners to see that that captures the effect of other inputs rather than just high end or high what you call chemical inputs and things like that, that could be a way to think. I'm just putting a forward line for us to think on that, and others who are on this call or working in this area can even think in depth. So having said that, I think the fact of market realization or the price relation and the market challenges, I don't say would remain, but I think it has its own way to find it out and get the value that may be provided. But I think one of my panelists, Mr. Zulfikar, also mentioned, end of the day, if you look at the actual scenario on ground, the price for a particular product which has been put in more effort or done differently would get compared in the customer at the same as others, unless it is bringing an extra piece of value, or if the customer is thinking at it a different way. So I think, and that's a bigger place to try and influence and play out. End of the day, I think the quality of the produce that is being produced, there are some current challenges on the ground for wheat management, which has also come up, which needs to be probably addressed by some areas where probably inputs are not there today or could be there but not available to the farmers, or the knowledge may not be there. So those areas may be important to look at from a forward-looking approach, and then I think that would again help in getting that the major percentage of 0.5 or above 0.5 grades to a higher level, to or not from a challenge perspective, but overcoming the challenge perspective. So I think that's an area probably we want to look at. And in all, I think what we say that there is a collective approach that is needed to propagate such good technologies that would actually sustain the livelihoods and the soil environment and health of the human population, as well as make it a point of onus to pass it on to the next generation, if not a better way, at least as what we have received it, and with an effort to make it even better. So with that, I'll keep an end to my talk, and I'll wait for the question and answer sessions when it comes. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Achito. So we had a nice set of comments, 360 degrees around the presentation, commenting on specific aspects of it, inspired by it, or developing it in various ways. So before I go to take on any questions from the audience, I just want to share a few thoughts about the larger context in which this work is going on, which got mentioned by various panelists in various ways. One is when we are comparing yields, when we are comparing income, when we are comparing drudgery and all that, in the back of our mind is perhaps a thought that there is an even level playing field between chemical and organic farming in which we are doing the comparison. But we have to take a close look at that. For example, the latest year for which the figures are perhaps available about subsidies for chemical fertilizers is, if you go to the website of the Lok Sabha, there is a committee on estimates on organic farming headed by Professor Mulimanur Joshi. About 3 years back, they put up the latest year for which the figures is available, 2016-17, which said that subsidy for chemical fertilizers is of the order of 70,000 crores per year. I think what Mr. Zulfikar was quoting was 80,000 crores. Maybe it's got updated now, which means if I'm cultivating a land of an acre of land chemically and my neighbor is a Siva who is doing an acre of land organically, even before I do anything, I have a head start of 4,000 to 5,000 rupees per acre on what he does. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The second thing is a passing mention was made by Mr. Zulfikar. In any kind of an economic calculation, people include certain things, certain costs and inputs that are traded in the marketplace, but not the externalities. Today, for example, if a chemical tanning factory produces certain effluents of heavy metals and they discharge it in the sea or the river, the law says that you have to clean it up at your own cost. And if the cost of cleaning up is prohibitive, you have to shut down the industry. Whereas in the case of agriculture, we find that for decades or sometimes for a century or more, chemical pesticides have been discharged into the water, discharged into the soil, taken up by animals and all that. And all these are external costs and they don't get internalized because agricultural economics has not yet figured a way to internalize these costs. Of course, we have some interesting studies that have come up from abroad. Jules Petty has carried out a detailed study of external costs of agriculture in Great Britain. And similarly from Iowa, there have been estimate of costs in the United States. There have been no such rigorous study in India, which means that there is one other inequality that we are dealing with. The third, which is equally important or damaging, if I may say so, is that, for example, I belong to this organization, Center for Indian Knowledge Systems. We're a non-profit. We've been hiring people with agriculture background for 25 plus years. We hired people with background like diploma agriculture, undergraduate, graduate, postgraduate, PhD. But any training or capacity building on sustainable agriculture that we do has to be imparted by us post-recruitment, or sometimes they may have a bit of a family background, which means that the entire state system for education and agriculture is subsidizing and supporting chemical farming. It's a very peculiar situation. And we discovered this very painfully as to how deeply inbuilt this system is. More than 10 years back, CIKS did an experimental program with Gandhigram Rural University, which was funded, we got it funded by HEWAS. Let's run a course on sustainable agriculture for students. We said we'll do a pilot for a year. The only condition was we said that the resource persons for the course should not just be university staff, but they should also be experienced sustainable agriculture farmers from Tamil Nadu or from anywhere. So for 1 year, we got this course funded and we believed rather naively that it will get mainstream. At the end of the year, when Gandhigram tried to mainstream this, they discovered, and we all discovered, that as per the ICR regulations, to teach agriculture in a university, you need a postgraduate degree from an ICR accredited institution. And so a sustainable farmer who for several generations has been practicing on farm cannot teach sustainable agriculture. So these are some of the systemic issues or inbuilt biases that the system lives with. So which means that it has a very interesting consequence. I'll just conclude my part of the summing up with an analogy. I live in the city of Chennai, and if I move away 50 kilometers from Chennai in any village, the plastic pot today is much more viable than the clay pot. This is strange because the clay pot uses raw material that's locally available, the artisanal skill that's locally available, and all the equipment are locally available. Whereas for the plastic pot, you perhaps get inputs from thousands of miles away, huge investments the state makes in fertilizer plants, shipping yards, transport, refineries, everything. Of course, if we put it this way, people may say, are you trying to stop all development? But that's not the question. What we need to see is that these huge investments that are made are making certain technologies and certain types of knowledge more viable and certain types of knowledge less viable. So this is the larger framework, and we need to see what's the technology that's being used, what is being supported, what's being subsidized, or what is not being subsidized. But there was a range of suggestions that came up, and the presentation also sparked off a lot of thoughts and discussions. So I'll stop with my observations here, and I'd like to see if there are any space. We do have time to spend 5 or 10 minutes, hopefully, to take some specific questions from among the audience, other than the panelists. I see that a few hands have been put up. I request my host to help me to identify those people who may have questions to ask. Please make your questions brief and to the point, and go ahead. I request the host to help me to identify those people, particularly if they were participants in any of this field-based activities about which they have any reflections or questions. Can you please
Hello.
identify yourself? Who was asking the question? Please go ahead, ma'am or sir. Yeah.
Mr. Rajiv, you can go ahead.
Yes. Good
Please
evening,
go ahead.
everyone. My name is Rajiv Barua. Thank you for the report. The question I mean, it's an observation. I think the report is really well done. I think we are not looking at the question of seeds, for instance. And the point I have is related to the whole hybrid story. You see, hybrids demand fertilizers, they demand additional water. So unless we change we have a paradigm shift in the seeds, you know, we cannot bring agroecology in. And you know, with the whole Andhra Pradesh ZBNF story, there have been questions about use of hybrids, the use of GMOs. So I think that's a real fundamental question. And you know, I've been working in cotton for over 30 years, and I know that we have very good genetic material in the country, you know, which is highly suited for rain-fed areas, dry areas. You know, they demand less fertilizers and water. So that's a point or a question or whatever you may like to take it. Thank you.
Thank you for your observation. Can you just ask if there's a next question? The name that I have here is Amit Wahani. Is that correct?
So we have
Yes.
a question from Rajesh, who was one of the contributors to the study. So his question is, how will the recent ordinance, that is the Contract Act or the Essential Commodity Acts, affect the sustainable agricultural practices in the country? He also has another question, which is how to see the future of sustainable agricultural practices post the COVID-19 situation we are facing.
Fine. Any of the panelists welcome to answer, or Shiva, you can lead. Go ahead.
I think I may not be good enough to. I mean, I leave it to other panelists to sort of take it.
Can I just respond to that post-COVID sustainable agriculture part of the question?
Please
don't
go
have
ahead,
insight.
sir.
Yeah, Iqbal. You know, we were having conversations with large number of civil society partners as well as farmers across the country, and the insight we got is that post-COVID, and especially during the Kharif crop, there was and with close to 20% to 30% increase in population in many of the villages, especially in states like Jharkhand, Orissa, parts of Chhattisgarh, certain pockets of southern Rajasthan and all. There has been a movement to grow more food crop. So that's one part. There is also a movement to grow crops which have low input cost. So significant, I mean, we will have to look at data at some point and ascertain this with, quantitative numbers. But millets cultivation seems to have increased as well. And there is a sense of risk associated with going for more cash crops. So there seems to be an impact of COVID happening, which may be temporary and triggered, but it's interesting. And if we want to further the argument that as of now, the main, defense against COVID is your own immunity, and nutrition has an important role to play with for vis-a-vis, building our immunity, then crop diversity and diverse food on the plate is an important argument for, health. And if we correlate it with the motivation of farmers to improving both consumer and family health, I think this is something that can be taken forward in conversations, and diversity of crop and sustainable agriculture can be taken. There'll be more receptivity in these times. I stop.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, you have something to say, Mr. Elton. Please go ahead.
Yeah. On that note of what we see in the likely direction in the post-COVID era, Yes, I would like to agree that indeed we are likely to see increased focus on or shift towards maximizing nutrition and public health outcomes from food versus just maximizing calories produced. And due to the experiences of lockdowns, people have seen how those can disrupt marketing systems and value chains. And so we are likely to see more movement towards focusing on local markets, direct connections between consumers and production, and so more localized value chains, so to say, and a more attention towards local sources of inputs, as well as seeds, things like seeds and sources of plant nutrition. Thank you.
It's just a small thing I'd like to add that one of the things we have noted with COVID is that there's a huge surge in the number of people who are reaching out directly to the producers. E-commerce is really booming. Other thing is, particularly in the cities and even in peri-urban areas, there's a huge rise of interest in home gardening. People want to grow their own vegetables, and perhaps because of the mental stress, people also find it very relaxing to spend some time in the garden and grow plants, talk to plants, etc. Are there any other specific questions or observations? Yeah.
I just wanted to add a point to that.
Please.
Please, as you correctly said, yes, the COVID has been an eye-opener to many, and I think the situation had and has created an opportunity to many who, even in the marketing side, to understand the value of vegetables going into local markets. So there's been probably an area to expand, which would expand in that area, which has actually been entrepreneurship type of approach for those who are actually carrying the products into the local markets and seeing value. I wanted to speak also on the question that the lady had put up, or the ordinance on the marketing. So since with the new ordinance, there is an opportunity to open up the previous APMC restrictions of the produce having been sold into the local APMCs. So this could actually be a positive side for a producer collectives or organizations, or as well as the farmers, to get their price realization at other places if that is so. I think it opens up a little bit of opportunity, and if there is a way to actually get their market linkages in other places for a better value, this could actually be a bonus or an incentive for the farmer to try different other ways than just the regular way of producing food and taking it to the local market. So if that answers a question, probably that is a feed for thought.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or hands raised? Please help me to identify if there are any, or we can go to the wrapping up.
Yes, so there's a question which is this is by Ms. Shilpa, and she asked, with 18% of the sample of women farmers, were all the study parameters segregated on gender bias, or was there any differences from a gender perspective, say in factors of motivation or in knowledge adoption of men farmers versus women farmers?
I think Shiva had answered in his presentation. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Vaishnavi, I mean, the voice is breaking. Can you just repeat it?
Yes. So Shilpa has asked that were all study parameters segregated on a gender basis, and was there any difference from a gender perspective in factors of motivation or in knowledge and adoption?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, maybe not with respect to the motivation, we haven't really so much delved deeper, but then it reflects very much the same. There isn't much difference. But when it comes to the challenges part, as I was mentioning in the presentation, so it certainly has a significant difference between the perceived challenges among women farmers and the men farmers. Women farmers really think the knowledge factor is a major hindrance, the irrigation and knowledge, while men farmers have cited most of the other factors like marketing or the drudgery or the labor part. And I mean, more details are there, but I mean, I will not be able to really share them here. Hopefully, we'll come up with another report sharing much more details about it.
So we've come almost to the end of it. We just have time if we need for just one more question or observation before I wrap up. Do I see a hand put up there? One, Mr. Ayya Devara Rao. Hello. Can the host help me to identify? Do we have one other gentleman there who has a question? Okay, if that's not so, I can just go ahead and conclude this session. So first of all, I think it's excellent presentation, and it provoked a whole lot of remarks, whole lots of creative thinking and suggestions all around in terms of what can be done. In fact, I think one of the most important things that's emerging is that in terms of continuation or future of any of the study, there are so many ideas that are coming up from the field. It also provoked a lot of thinking of me. For example, when you say that farmers are not just looking at yield, but they're looking at it in a more holistic sense. It also reminded me that very often in dryland situation, which is the major cropping situation in India, farmers are looking not just to maximize the yield, but they're trying to manage the risks best. Very often in a dryland area, we tell farmer that your seed rate is too much. You can use 1/10 or 1/5 amount of seeds. And then you find out that the recommendations are really made for an ideal situation in university, where the irrigation is controlled, where there are no risks, the soil fertility is optimum, and you can use just so much seeds with good vitality and fertility. Whereas the farmer is really not just trying to maximize yield, he is also trying to provide for a bad year where he has to manage the risks in a most imaginative and most scientific kind of way. Lots and lots of suggestions have come up, and I think it's most welcome. For example, I saw suggestions about taking a detailed look at some technical aspects like weed management for a greater study on externalities of agriculture, and the 80-20 or the Pareto principle type of rule. Can we focus on a core set of things which contribute a maximum amount to the total output that we are looking at, and also to see how we can ensure that we don't proclaim a success very quickly and do a very detailed and rigorous documentation, because only that will carry a certain kind of credibility to everything across. Point is not just to talk to those who are ideologically already converted to an organic way of life or thinking, but if we think that this needs to make economic sense, it needs to make business sense, and we need to make a case for taking bits and pieces of 50 acres somewhere, 500 acres somewhere, to a real mainstream. It has to be rigorous documentation and data that is shared. I also think that it's very apt that a discussion like this is coming up now. Perhaps it can come up only now, because in the immediate wake of the post-independence situation, the focus is quite a bit on increasing yield and increasing production. Green revolution was the way that we went. And I still remember, I want to share with you one of my memories from childhood is a famous cartoon that was drawn by the well-known cartoonist Mr. R.K. Lakshman, who was trying to communicate how vulnerable India was in terms of foreign aid and food from abroad. This cartoon shows a minister looking out of the window at the rain that's coming down. And then he says, good, this year the monsoons are set in on time. Once again, we can ask the Americans to mind their own business. So the extent to which the food policy was vulnerable to external influences and we were leading a hand-to-mouth or a ship-to-mouth existence is perhaps just a memory of the past now. So the Green Revolution gave us a political spine, and it enabled us to ask some more basic questions and pose some very specific issues. So I think this is an opportune time to revisit, and I'm very happy that this VikasAnvesh team, Sivamuthu Prakash and Professor Fansalkar and his entire team deserve congratulations to come up with a report with such substantial findings. Because one of the problems that I always have with reports that are too academic or researcher based, which is inward looking, is that the major finding of the report is people would say that we have to do more studies, we have to spend more time. Without doing more studies, we can't say a word, So unlike that, this is a refreshing departure. It's saying specific things, it's provoking opinion, and it's made academics, donors, and various others to say that, yeah, we can look at specific things, we can look at some next steps, So congratulations to Shiva and VikasAnvesh and the support team, and also our thanks to various people from across India who participated in this. And I want to thank each one of the panelists for having given their time and thought to this. It's clear that all of them had done their homework, gone through the report, which made this a very meaningful discussion. So I'll now conclude and hand it over to the hosts if they want to say a few words before we close the session formally. Shiva and Professor Fansalkar, please take over. Thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Balu. So, and other eminent panelists for joining and giving this much time and commenting on the report, as well as giving your perception about the sector as well. Yeah, we just like to sort of convey about the report is available online for all the participants. So you may be able to download it through the link which was been shared here, or you can visit our website, VikasAnvesh.in. So it's available there. So, and we hope to get back with probably in another 2 or 3 months with one more set of discussions, which will be very much focused upon the gender. Yeah, with that, I close it, and thank you very much for everyone for joining us today. Thank you.